Well, today is the last day of June. It's June 30th of 2022, and we welcome you to the Chapter 49 podcast. My name is Larry Lannan. I'm a volunteer in the area of communications, and what I mostly do in communications is this podcast, which is available both in audio and video versions for you. We'll tell you more later if you want to maybe let others people know how to find it, or if you're listening on audio, how to get it to video and vice versa. But we're glad you're with us. Chapter 49 represents most IRS employees in the state of Indiana. So we're very happy you chose to join us. And we're also happy that Duncan Giles, our chapter president, has joined us again. And summer is in full swing. And I understand you actually celebrated the start of summer by going to a Major League Baseball game.
Yeah, my absolutely fantastic girlfriend had never been to a major league game, knew that I was a Dodgers fan. So last week we went to an afternoon Dodgers-Reds game.
Yeah, and I understand the Dodgers. One question, beating the Reds is not really a big deal in the major leagues because the Reds are one of the worst teams in the major leagues. But that's for a sports podcast, so it's not for our podcast today. But I'm glad you two enjoyed the trip to Cincinnati. Had good weather, and I know it was not always assured that you would have good weather, but you did. So we glad you're enjoying summer. We hope everybody watching and listening is enjoying their summer. We've talked about that numerous times on this podcast, because getting out and enjoying life, going outside, just doing the things that you enjoy, you need to do that. You need to balance your life. And if you don't balance your life, it comes back to haunt you at some point. Well, we're going to come now to our issues, and I'm not sure if this issue has much to do with balance, but it is about return to the office. I don't know if that's balanced or not, because this is the week, and we've been waiting for this for months, that there would be a return to the office. There was a kind of a mini return to the office a few weeks ago. And this week, beginning this week, this has been the return to office week, where the evacuation order is no longer in place, and people who are using the contract in their use of telework. So, Duncan, we're only a few days in. How's it going?
It's moving forward. Let's put it that way. It's bumpy, but that's to be expected. You're always going to have issues with something like this. It's almost like, starting a car up that hasn't really been going for 2 years, and getting the office back up and going, making sure everything was there. The managers have been there for a little while to make sure everything is ready. But we've been pushing nationally and well as locally to make sure areas are clean, that regular cleanings are being done. It's just, are smart cards working? Is this working? Is that working? We've had bunch of little things, but thankfully so far, I've not seen anything in the state of Indiana, and I haven't heard anything from my compatriots across the country that is telling me that there are any huge issues out there, aside from the fact that there's a lot of social anxiety from folks who are understandably apprehensive about coming back into the office.
I wonder, maybe you don't know, maybe just a feel, if you have no actual data on this, but how many people are returning to the office this week or next? If they're working maximum telework, then they have to be in the office 2 days after, within a 2-week pay period. This is the first week of the pay period. Do we have any idea how many people are coming into the office for the first time since we had that evacuation order go into place?
Not sure. Right now we've got anecdotal things, but nothing hard data. But I would say it's quite a few employees out there. I get reports on COVID on the Indiana PODs, and had one where an employee reported COVID. And when were they last in the office? Well, they were last in the office 2 years ago. In this particular, it was a smaller POD. And so, my response back to FMSS was, and we're not going to do extensive cleaning for that. It's just one of those things where, people have shown that they can do the job full time from home, but the IRS in its wisdom has wanted to get that sense of community and collaboration, as they call it, to have folks come in at least twice a pay period to try and get that esprit de corps going again.
Well, as long as they are in fact collaborative, that's fine. Yeah, that is interesting. I know that you discussed at some length in some past podcasts just the types of discussions that you had, because you were there for the national agreement bargaining from beginning to end. You were one of two permanent chapter presidents, along with the IRA, the NTU staff, and of course the management side, that talked at length about telework, talked at length about expanding telework, which you did get the chance to do in terms of numbers of positions that would be covered by it. But yet, you still haven't been able to crack that one code on allowing people to work out of their home most of the time. There are some small agencies that are experimenting with that, having basically your home as your POD. And I'm beginning to wonder if once some data is available on that, if that might be something that the union would push in the future.
Oh, it's absolutely something that NTU is looking at doing and has pushed ever since we completed the negotiations on the national agreement, because we believe that there are many positions out there that don't have to report to the office. And we understand the issues about locality pay, things of that nature. We do understand that, but we feel those can be dealt with. It's just something that this is quite a big step for IRS to take in doing the telework that they're doing now. So they're wanting to make sure that everything is okay before they even look to expand it further.
So at this point, you are required at minimum to be in the office 2 work days out of a 2-week pay period. That is the requirement now. So are you seeing any disputes over between managers and employees about maybe the manager is pushing that employee to be in more than 2 days of pay period, whether they really need to be there or not?
So far, no, and that's for Indiana. Now, in other parts of the country, that may be different. But we have not had that yet crop up in the state of Indiana. That has been the fear when they talk about doing something like this is, okay, is somebody going to try and take it upon themselves to have their own interesting interpretation of the national agreement that says, oh yeah, I can have these people come in 3 or 4 times a pay period instead of twice. I don't think that's been widespread. And when then that's been brought to the attention of national, our national vice president, Doreen Greenwald, and national head of negotiations, Ken Moffett, have been very quick to reach out to their IRS counterparts to work that issue.
So I guess the bottom line here is that it's you and your fellow chapter presidents and people involved with the national NTEU organization are all going to be taking a look at this. And maybe by the time we do our next podcast, we might have a little better feel for that.
Correct.
Let's talk about COVID in another way. Of course, COVID is what caused the evacuation order. COVID is starting to tamp down in terms of it making people sick and putting them in the hospital. But COVID is still out there. You can still catch it. It is still spreading. And we still have high risk areas in America. For example, the Chicago area has been designated by health officials to be a high risk area for getting COVID. St. Louis, another area designated as a high risk area in being able to catch COVID. So you want to be especially careful in those places. And I know we have a few listeners to our podcast in those areas. And the other part of that, Duncan, is that, yes, mask wearing is now an option. It is not required. So I'm wondering if there's probably no good way to measure this. Do we know how many people are choosing to wear masks, or is there any, like you say, anecdotal evidence that would tell us anything there?
Yeah, this is one of those things where the SCRs, the Senior Commissioners Representative Organization, goes out each week and lets, when a particular post of duty changes in their respective low, medium, or high risk, they'll send something out. So, Chicago and St. Louis are 2 examples that have been in a high risk where everybody's required to wear a mask. Even if you're not in a high risk area, you absolutely have the option of wearing a mask. And I do know that several employees in the state of Indiana and across the country are doing that when they are in the post of duties. And it goes to, I think that is just a smart way to do it. I myself believe that right now, because COVID is not as severe as it was, the symptoms of that it's probably being greatly underreported. We probably have a lot of cases out there that are not being reported because of the fact that the symptoms aren't that great. People might think they have the flu or a cold or something of that nature. So it can be disconcerting. So, I'm one of those, that wears a mask when I go out in public. I know several people that do that, employees as well. And if you want to wear a mask while you're working, even in a low risk area, absolutely, you should feel free to do that. No one should say you shouldn't be wearing a mask, don't wear a mask, anything of that nature, because this is your health that you're dealing with. NTU, both nationally and locally, is doing everything we can to make sure that the areas that you're working in are as safe as possible, but there's still going to be a lot of personal responsibility to do what you can for yourself. So that's why I urge people, make sure you're vaccinated, make sure you get your boosters, wear a mask when you're going to be talking to people in public.
And there's another aspect of COVID that we need to talk about, and that has to do with the vaccine mandate. We've been giving updates on this. We do have a little more information now for you. For those who maybe haven't been following this, President Biden issued a vaccine mandate for all federal employees. That was challenged in the courts, and one federal judge in Texas issued an order that was supposed to be honored nationwide, saying the vaccine mandate was not legal. I don't remember if it's constitutional, but he basically struck it down using legal arguments. Went to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is in New Orleans, Louisiana. Well, an appeal like that first goes to a 3-judge federal panel. So those federal judges those 3 judges on the panel voted 2-1 to say President Biden has the right to invoke a vaccine mandate. There's nothing illegal about it. He has the legal right to do it. The people who are trying to strike down the vaccine mandate went to the appeals court, the full court of all the judges, which is like about 20, 25 judges, kind of depends on the circuit. They want all the judges to hear the case and vote on it. Now, the appeals court doesn't have to do that, but in this case, the decision was made, and it was just we'd heard rumors and rumblings that this was going to happen, but it became official just a few days ago that this appeals court would hear the case before the entire court. All the judges are going to hear this case again. They got to basically start over. It's like a second tier of appeal in the same court. So that's going to be heard soon. But the real question here is what happens to the vaccine mandate? Does it be implemented during this appeals process or not? And as we understand the legal standing at this point, is that vaccine mandate is still being held in abeyance, still being on hold legally while this appeal is being heard. So, Duncan, it looks like we're still in a holding pattern on that. That vaccine mandate is still possibly out there, but it's not being implemented at this time.
Exactly so. Yeah, it's one of those things that the panel of judges, as you said, has said, okay, we're going to go ahead and review this, the full panel. And until we do review this and make a decision, that's going to be the status quo. We're going to hold the vaccination in abeyance, which means we're not moving forward with it. So as of right now, there is no vaccine mandate. Now, once they come down with their decision, shortly after that, it could go back into effect. But as of this moment in time, it is not in effect. So, although we urge folks to, like I said, get vaccinated, get boosted, there is no mandate right now.
Okay, so that's where it stands. We're once again going to wait on the full court to rule on this. And but just for people who know, if you're unhappy with whatever that court decides, the only appeal left is the U.S. Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court decides which cases it's going to take. Whether that would take that case is a good a guess as yours as mine. There's just no way of knowing that. And they only take a small number of cases. Would they take this case? It is kind of a prominent case. Who knows? So that's where things stand now. The vaccine mandate is not being enforced, at least at this time, and we'll let you know if that changes. I want to move on to another issue because Duncan, Commissioner Rettig, you had a chance to meet with him, talk with him some time ago when he was a fairly new commissioner and visited Indianapolis. He made some remarks to Congress recently about the 2020 tax year, about trying to catch up on that. He did praise employees. That was always good to see a commissioner willing to do that because he knows the employees are working as hard as possible on all everything that's backed up. Most importantly, that paper backup, the tax returns that are on paper, and also correspondence on paper. Obviously, the service is way behind all that, and the employees are working as hard as they can, and some being taken out of the regular job at this point to do that work for now. And you know, the commissioner said a lot of other things. He talked about the need for more hiring, which NTU fully agrees with him on that, and the need for new technology, of which NTU is also quite on board with him. So we have some commonality with the commissioner on a number of these issues. So when you read what the commissioner had to say in that speech, what was your reaction?
You know, like you, I was very pleased that he recognized the efforts of the employees. You and I have talked many times on this podcast about the amazing job that employees have done, you know, especially during this pandemic, the last 2 years, to get as much work done as we have been. But there's just not, as he said, there's not enough people. We do not have enough people. I don't know when we're going to be able to hire and retain. And that's the key thing to me, retain those that we do hire. And the technology that we have is simply outdated and it makes it tougher. We are making advances. They are doing some things a little bit differently that do speed some things up. But, you know, to change our systems is sort of like trying to change a flat tire on a car going 60 miles an hour. It can be done, but it's going to be very difficult to do. And it's going to take some time. And that's what it amounts to, because we can't shut down and just say, okay, we're going to switch over all our systems and we're going to be down a month. We don't have that advantage. We can't do that. So it's one of those things where we've got to do it piecemeal, and they're doing the best they can, but it's woefully underfunded. We still need, you know, I know a lot of money over the years, over the decades, has gone to improving our IT, but it's a continual thing that we need to do to provide better service to the American taxpayers and to make the job easier for employees. It's a win-win for everyone if we get that funded. And we have to have the employees to be able to do the job, whether it's in the service centers, on the phones, collecting the revenue, auditing the companies, any of the support staff, whatever it is. We need more employees in every single part of the IRS.
You know, Duncan, I don't think you have been with the service long enough to remember this, because this goes back to the 1980s when I was working in examination, where they do the audits. And the IDRS system was the backbone system we used for processing returns, even tracking everything that went in as far as audits were concerned. And the IT people went in and did what they called the SCRS conversions. I can't even remember what SCRS stood for. It's one of those many acronyms we had. There was a conversion to us. It was supposed to be an updated system. And Duncan, the entire system went down. And all of us who are working in the clerical area of examination, we had to pile up all the paper cases because we couldn't process them. We had to wait until the system came up. And sometimes it only came up certain hours of the day. They couldn't even keep it up all day. And that was a great example of trying to change trying to, how should I put it, completely retool an airplane while it's flying. It's the same sort of thing that is going on. So you don't want to ever get into a situation where the backbone IRS system for processing returns and tracking examinations and all those sorts of things go down. I mean, if that happens, that is catastrophic. And if that happened, and you also had a paper backlog, I mean, the public would probably string us up, the Congress too, because it would be impossible to do our work. So I think that what the commissioner is saying is a word, kind of a warning shot, saying, look, you know, if we continue with these personnel issues, we can continue to be way behind the ball technologically, we're going to pay a price for it, and the public will be the ones who will suffer.
Exactly. So, and this commissioner's term ends in November, and but he's still out there pushing every chance he gets for the more hiring, for the more money for IT, because he realizes how important it is. And I give him kudos for that.
Yeah, and just for people who don't know, I believe is it not a 5-year term for a commissioner? And
That is correct.
so we don't know what President Biden will do. I don't know if Mr. Rettig wants another 5 years of that job, but it will be up to President Biden to appoint someone, whether it's Mr. Rettig get reappointed or if he appoints someone else to come in there and do that job. It's a 5-year term. Now, some commissioners haven't served all 5 years, and there's a lot of stories there. But that you go in unless you do something awful, you're there for 5 years. So.
Yeah, they looked at me, but they didn't think I would do good appearing before Congress.
Oh, so you missed that Mr. Universe thing. You have to have your commissioner candidate. Is that it? Okay, I'm just checking. Yeah, that's right, Duncan. You might, who knows, get your resume in that. I got no reaction on that.
Yeah.
Okay, there's something else we need to talk about in terms of processing, because yes, we are still behind, way behind as an organization. I should say we, because I've been retired for a long time, but the agency is way behind on 2021 tax year documents. Now, what kind of documents are we talking about, and how far behind are we as far as what you know of on all this?
We're very, very far behind because we've basically done these surge teams to take people out of other jobs and put them towards things, whether it be on the phones or whether it's doing 1040Xs or whatever it is, to try and get as much as we can of the 2020 tax year caught up. The good news is we've basically done that, which is great. The bad news is it sacrificed everything else. So now 2021 tax year is piled up just about as high as the 20 was, according to the National Taxpayer Advocates report that we saw. So it's, is this going to be a never ending cycle until we get more hiring? If we're able to get more hiring and if people will stay, because these jobs are not the highest paying in the world to process returns. The people who do them are good. They work their butts off, but we just need a lot more of them to be able to catch up. And, it's not something you can learn overnight. There's a little bit of a learning curve. So this is not a problem that's going to go away easily.
The Taxpayer Advocate did issue that report you talk about, and that's a very interesting situation. This came out of the restructuring of the Internal Revenue Service that happened in the late 1990s. That law established the Taxpayer Advocate, and that would be one person who was appointed, I believe that person is appointed, and that Taxpayer Advocate oversees that entire organization. If most local offices, every state has a Taxpayer Advocate operation. They have a local Taxpayer Advocate. They work cases. They have case workers, case advocates, all those sorts of things. But that Taxpayer Advocate at the national level is interesting, because even though that Taxpayer Advocate is a part of the IRS, it is supposed to be an independent part of the IRS. So if the IRS on one hand says, oh, we're making progress, we're working on this paper inventory, we're making progress, and the Taxpayer Advocate maybe the next day says, wait a minute here, maybe you're not doing as well as you say, maybe we are still way behind and we have a lot of work to do. That's sort of what has happened with the Taxpayer Advocate. It is supposed to be totally independent within the IRS system and give an unbiased view of where things are. And I find that a very interesting. Not too many government agencies have something like an advocate within the agency's management chain itself.
Yeah, when this was originally set up, it was one of those things where they talked about, well, how can somebody be truly independent if they're doing this? In my 20 plus years as chapter president, I can flat guarantee you they've all been very independent. Sometimes they cross swords quite a lot with IRS leadership on things they would like to see done. So I think that having the advocate there is a great thing. I think it irritates some of our employees and some of our management and leadership officials. But overall, I believe the practice is good to have somebody that's looking out for the taxpayers. And if there are any systemic problems, issues, things of that nature falling through the cracks, there's somebody there to try and catch it. But like the rest of the IRS, they're woefully understaffed and overworked, the taxpayer advocates. So it's tough for them as well.
And when you have so many issues, you're so way behind. There are going to be a lot of cases in taxpayer advocate. So a lot of people are being impacted, and they need somebody to intervene for them. So these caseworkers, I guess they're still hiring them. I mean, that's one growth area of the IRS, are these caseworkers and taxpayer advocate. It's sad to see that, because the reason they need so many people, because our systems are breaking down, and that's what that advocate's operation was set up to do. So we'll keep an eye on that. And anytime the advocate issues a report, you need to pay attention. That, as you say, a very set up to be an independent part of the IRS, and the top managers outside the advocate know better than to ever challenge the advocate. They just leave the advocate alone. They don't ever challenge the advocate. That's their independence needs to be treasured. Okay, Duncan, time for your final comment.
I just, we're coming up to the July 4th holiday. Some of you, by the time you listen or view this, may have already been through that. I just want everybody to take the time to spend, be with your family, be with your friends, be safe, and realize how precious our independence is. That this is something, this experiment that's gone on for well over 220 years, 240 years, is something that was very, very unique in world history, and is still going strong today and will continue to go strong. So it's something to be celebrated. I'm very much a believer in the patriotic themes of the 4th of July. And I just think that everybody should take the time, if they have it, to be with family and friends, reflect a little bit, get your batteries recharged, and get ready for the second half of the year.
I just have one thing to add to that, Duncan. Those are all good comments, but I know where I live in Indiana, and in most of Indiana and a large swath of the country, we are way below normal in our rainfall, which means if you're playing around with fireworks, please be careful. Don't start any fires, because it's sadly way too easy to start a fire when you have very dry conditions and you're playing around with fireworks. So if you know what you're doing, take all the precautions, and don't be starting any fire, any grass fires. We've already been warned in my HOA, watch your fireworks, because we are extremely dry at the moment. We're way below our rainfall level. And I think that's true in many parts of the United States. Duncan, Giles, thank you once again for being a part of this podcast. It wouldn't be the same without you. And we thank you for watching and listening. The video version is available on YouTube. Just look up Duncan Giles. There's several of them. Look at the one with the Chapter 49 podcast on the video feed. And the audio version is available on just about any podcast platform on audio, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on and on. So you can find it there. Just search under podcasts by Larry Lannan, Lannan. You'll see all the podcasts I produce, and the Chapter 49 podcast will be on that list. Well, once again, thank you for watching and listening. We appreciate the fact that you're with us, and we will be back, if all goes well, again next week. So please be kind and be safe.